I am a witness to history. I have lived under socialism. I have lived under communism. Nobody can challenge me, not even the corrupt media. In 1938, Austria was in a very deep depression. More than 30% unemployed. Poverty was rampant. People were going from house to house for a bowl of soup and a slice of bread. I remember my mother had a kettle of soup on her stove every day, and she baked bread, and about 30 people would knock on the door to beg for a bowl of soup and a slice of bread to keep them alive. How could this all happen? Our neighbor to the north, in Germany, where Hitler ruled since 1933, they had the equal economic depression like in Austria, and when Hitler started ruling, things changed. He was building the Autobahn, the freeway, and people were getting employed. So we got the news from Germany that in Germany they had a high living standard. Everybody was driving the Beetle car, the Volkswagen, and people seemed to be happy. So the Austrian people thought, why don't we annex Austria to Germany to get rid of the poverty and find employment for our unemployed people? So the government called for an election, a plebiscite. It was supposed to be held on March 13, 1938, but we had massive demonstration. It was just horrible, much, much worse than Ferguson in Missouri. They were burning down whole blocks of city and shooting people. There were two political parties. The Communist Party was getting very powerful, and of course the Socialist Party, Hitler's party, also were getting powerful. So the government postponed the election to April 10, 1938, and would you believe that Hitler won by a landslide? 98% of Austrian people voted for Hitler, even though Austria was about 98% Catholic, but they voted for Hitler. Hitler was a very clever politician. He talked like an American politician. He told us everything what we like to hear. Full employment, guaranteed income, and a high living standard. Well, we got a new government, and things happened very fast. I was in 6th grade, 12 years old, in public school. We had a very good public school. It was like a Catholic school. We had prayer before class and after class, and we had religious instruction twice a week. That morning, when I walked into my classroom, the crucifix was gone. And there was Hitler's picture with the Nazi flag on each side. And our teacher said, today we don't pray anymore. We will sing Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. Germany above everybody. We were sort of astonished. And then the teacher said, we also could not go to church on Sunday because Sunday was National Youth Day. We had to report to the gymnasium at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the first 2 hours we had political education. Today, I would call it political indoctrination. We were being told by our teacher not to listen to our parents. Our parents were sort of old fogies, and we should not listen to our parents, only listen to Hitler. Hitler understood the young people, which our parents did not. So what was happening in our school system, literally our teachers were questioning us how our parents think and talk politically. So the school had literally a pipeline into our homes, what our parents were talking and thinking. Because we students were being questioned all the time what our parents were talking politically. So the rest of the day, on Sunday, we had sports. Oh, and we got all the sports equipment free. We got tennis rackets, we got golf clubs, and we got skis, all free, paid by the government. And the boys, when they were of age 16, they got motorcycles. Can you imagine that? They could form a motorcycle squad, so we would go home after the whole session on Sunday and tell our parents how wonderful Hitler was, that he was giving us all the sports equipment free, everything. So we got a new government. The radio station was nationalized, taken over by the government, so that we could listen, and we got free radios from the government, so we could listen to Hitler. He was a very good orator. He gave very excellent speeches. And of course, we were being told that you had to listen to Hitler's speeches, but don't you dare turn your radio to a foreign radio station to listen to Switzerland or any other, maybe Great Britain, capital punishment. So we didn't get any information whatsoever. No information from the outside world except what the government told us. The first thing what they did, the government nationalized education. The next thing, the government nationalized our banks, because the banks, they charged 25% interest. That's why farmers were going bankrupt. They couldn't pay the taxes, they couldn't pay the mortgage, so the banks would cash in the farms, and that way, you know, the government nationalized our banks to keep a good eye on the bank, because the government told us that the banks were usurpers, charging 25% interest, and that's why the government had to nationalize our banks. They also nationalized our car industry. Austria was building a little car, a little bit bigger than a Fiat, was called a Steyr, and the government said, we don't need another little car, we already have the Beetle, the Volkswagen. So they turned our car industry into a defense industry. They made tanks. They made tanks. We wondered why we needed tanks. So also a lot of rules and regulation in business and agriculture. The government grew and grew and grew, a big, big government with hundreds and thousands of bureaucrats watching over us, especially in agriculture. The bureaucrats would go out on the farm and tell the farmers what to plant and how much he had to harvest, regarding of the weather. They would count the livestock. Of course, all the food what the farmers produced had to be taken into the food bank of the government. Everything was regulated. Everything was regulated. The bureaucrats would even go out on the farm and count the chickens and told the chickens how many eggs they had to lay. It was crazy. Rules and regulation. Now in private business, they would go into a restaurant and snoop around safety and health. And if something was not correct, like the restaurants, if they had a square table with square corners, they would tell the owner, you have to have round tables, so nobody could bump themselves on the corner of the table. So that was our OSHA. One time I was giving a speech in Iowa, and a farmer in my audience told me that when he was plowing and creating some dust, the bureaucrat followed him and told him that he cannot plow unless he had a water cannon following the plow to put out the dust. How crazy, how crazy. That's what socialism is all about. Everything has to be ruled and regulated, everything. Austria, before Hitler, we had excellent health care. We had good hospitals. We had our health care insured privately. We had good doctors. That all changed. We had socialized medicine. The government took over our health care. And it was bad. For instance, if you had or you needed elective surgery, like for whatever, you had to wait for 18 months to get a bed in the hospital, because health care was free for everybody. It was very misused. People would run to the doctor if they had a splinter in the finger, or if they needed to take earwax out of the ear, because it was free. People misused it very much. So many doctors were leaving the country, coming to America, including my own husband. When my husband came to the United States in the early 50s, he just marveled how wonderful our health care was and how modern our hospitals were. He said, I hope this will never ever change. Today, my husband would roll over in his grave with Obamacare, and I do hope that we get rid of Obamacare, because it is rotten to the core. Also, with all the rules and regulation, with everything was being conducted by the government, everything, our healthcare system, it absolutely, you could not believe. My brother-in-law was a family physician. When he would come to his office in the morning, 40 patients were already waiting. So he could only take about 10 minutes time for one patient. And he said, it is not what medicine is all about. I hope, he said, it will sometime change again. Well, also, in education, when my mother took me out of that horrible school, the public school, and she told me that she would send me to a private school with an excellent curriculum, but not much fun. So she packed me off, and we went to that new school, a huge building with a high wall around and a locked iron gate. And I thought my mother would put me into a prison, the way it looked like. But when I bid her goodbye at the gate, she said, "My child," she said, "today you don't understand why I am doing this. But when you grow a little bit older, you might understand that I am saving you from this godless humanism which is taught in our school system." I almost hated my mother at that time, but today I thanked my mother 1,000 times that she saved me from the godless humanism which is taught today in our public schools. As my education progressed, I did not like the new school right away because it was very, very strict discipline. We couldn't even go to the movie because the movie industry was taken over by the government, and all the films was propaganda. Propaganda, that's what we had. So when I applied for my college, what subjects I would take, I wanted to be a journalist or a writer, and the government said, "No, we don't need journalists, we don't need writers either, we need teachers." Because the teachers, a lot of the teachers who were teaching correctly, they were being dismissed. And so they needed a lot of new teachers because they had to teach the type of socialism what the government prescribed. So I had to take the education block. Luckily, I love children. So in my last year of college, I was sent to a small village in Austria, and when I arrived there, I was told that they had about 15, and absolutely, I will not be politically correct. I was told that they had about 15 mentally, correct word, retarded people. They were all good, useful people. They couldn't read or write. They couldn't speak very well either. We had a janitor in our school, Vincent. He could not speak very well. He could not read or write, but he kept our school clean. So one day, I looked out of my classroom window, and there was a van out there. And all these 15 people were being ushered into the van. So I asked my principal, where are they taking all these people? I thought they'd probably take them out for a picnic. And my principal said, "Oh no, the health department came around to the parents and asked them if they would sign the paper that their son or daughter would be sent to an institution to learn how to read and write." Gladly, the parents signed the papers because they sure would like to have their son that he could read a book. So off he went. 6 months later, the letters came to the parents that their son or daughter died a natural but merciful death. They were being euthanized. They were being killed. Also, after the war, I found out that 20,000 handicapped children were being euthanized because the government did not want to have any handicapped people. So, the other thing what the government did, equality. Equality was very, very important to the government. Everything had to be equal. So we got the Equal Rights Amendment. Equal rights for everybody. Well, equal rights for women, it sounded very good. But what the Equal Rights Amendment was being used to equalize the country's wealth, socially and economically. Economically, to redistribute the wealth of the country, that everybody would have the same income. That's socialism. And socially, what the government did, they created child care centers, because under socialism, everybody has to work. Otherwise, were called a parasite. So the moms who stayed home to take care of their children had to be out into the workforce so that the government could extract more money for taxes. And what happened to the children? They were put into child care centers. You could leave your child, your baby, there for 7 days. Whatever you want, the longer you left your child in the child care center, the better the government liked it. To mold your children exactly how the government wanted them. Now in South Dakota, I just found that in our legislature, we had an early child care, an early education bill for a 3-year-old. Can you imagine a 3-year-old going to school? Exactly what Hitler did with the child care center, to take our children literally out of the cradle and send them to school, that the government can mold them exactly the way they want them. So that was our school system, and the equality for everything, a guaranteed income, free housing, food stamps, subsidized housing, and everything free, that everybody would be equal. Also, they came in Austria, of course, people had guns, and the government would say, the guns are very dangerous. There were a lot of hunting accidents, children playing with guns, and we had murderers again, criminals. So the government told us that in order to catch the criminals, we had to bring our guns to the police station, that they could identify the serial number of the gun and track the criminals. We thought that was a good idea, to track the criminals, the murderers. Not much later, the government said it didn't work. We couldn't track all the criminals. In order not to have any crimes or any murders, bring your guns to the police station, and if you don't do that, capital punishment. So they took our guns keep your guns and buy more guns and stack up on ammunition. We might need it. I give you a classic example. In Switzerland, everybody has to have a gun. Hitler took every country in Europe except Switzerland. Switzerland, it is law that everybody must have a gun. So Hitler did not tackle Switzerland because he would have gotten into a hornet's nest. And Switzerland did not have a war for more than 600 years. Dictatorship did not happen overnight. It took 5 years, from 1938 until 1943, to gradually get into a full-blown dictatorship. Full-blown dictatorship. Had we kept our guns, had we been smart enough to keep our guns, we would have fought a bloody battle to keep our freedom. But we were stupid enough to go to the police station and register our guns and bring our guns. We were being disarmed. How terrible it is to lose your freedom. When the people fear the government, that's tyranny. But when the government fears the people, that's liberty. Like I said, Hitler was a very clever politician. He also nationalized our churches. He created the church tax. He said the beautiful cathedrals are very expensive for upkeep and restoration. It costs a lot of money, and there is not enough money passed on Sunday by the basket. So we have to, when you pay your income tax, and you know, with all the freebies what was given out by the government, our taxes went up to 70%. 70%. So when we paid our income tax, we paid 2% church tax. That was the way that none of the pastors or priests could speak out against the government. They would lose their funding. And it's still today that the churches over there are having a church tax, but it went up to 8%. And a lot of people resign from the church because of the taxes. That's why a lot of churches are almost empty when they create a church tax. Now I tell you a true story. In 1985, I had the opportunity to go to Switzerland, to Geneva, to support President Reagan at the summit conference versus Gorbachev. When I arrived there, I found out that there was going to be what they called a peace march, a communist march. A lot of communists from Europe and from America came over there. Hollywood, Bella Abzug, Jesse Jackson, Barbara Boxer, Jane Alexander. They were all coming from Hollywood to join the Communist Peace March. I disguised myself as a hippie. I looked horrible. There's a picture out there of me, what I looked like. So I joined the Peace March. I marched with Jesse Jackson and Bella Abzug, the congresswoman from New York. And as we arrived at the Hotel Hilton for a press conference, Bella Abzug was greeted by a German woman, and Bella Abzug spoke fluent German. And what they were talking about, Bella said, the German woman actually had a seat in the German parliament with the Green Party, the watermelon. And Bella was telling her the surprise what she had, that they had a private meeting with Premier Gorbachev. Well, of course, I understood the language, and I was surprised that those two women would have a private meeting with a head of state. So I looked around the room. There were about 8 or 10 people who were not at the Peace March. They looked kind of disheveled, muddy boots and torn jackets. So I wondered where they came from. Well, they went over the border. And I walked up to a woman and I asked her what she was doing here. And she said, of course, I am supporting Premier Gorbachev. And I said, what kind of group are you? She said, we are all members of the German Communist Party, and we are supporting Premier Gorbachev. And I said, well, that sounds very interesting to me. And she looked at my buttons, you know, the peace buttons, feminist buttons, everything. And then she said, are you a comrade? And I nodded, but I lifted my right leg. that means I don't agree. So I said, now tell me, you are members of the Communist Party. What is your really goal? What is your future? She said, well, right now we are in Nicaragua, but she said, you know, we are going into Honduras and other small countries, but she said, our real goal is Mexico. And I said, Mexico, that's such a corrupt country and a poor country. Why would you go to Mexico? She said, that is our most important base. And I said, you need a lot of people. It sounds to me like you're kind of planning a little revolution. You need a lot of people to help you. She laughed out loud. She said, your churches are doing the work for us. Our churches. It hit me like a ton of bricks, because I saw in my church bulletin the sanctuary movement, that the churches were helping those illegals who are coming into our country, helping them. So you know, you heard about the caravans. They're all coming here. They're all young people. Young people, and they did not look like refugees. I know what refugees look like. I have seen them after World War II. They don't look like refugees. They're coming for something else. Be very watchful. Be very watchful, because they're not coming here for jobs or a better life. They're coming here to cause trouble. Earlier, when I said that nobody can challenge me, nobody, not even the fake media. This is the Berlin Diary. Berlin Diary. It's a book written by an American correspondent who was in Europe from 1938 until 1941. And he wrote this diary, everything what Hitler did until 1941. That is why the media is leaving me alone. It's a document, and nobody can challenge me. America is the greatest country in the world, if we can keep it. Keep your eyes open. We have a lot of rats in our government. We have to get rid of them. Those of us who sailed past the Statue of Liberty, we came to a country of unbelievable freedom and opportunity. America is the greatest country in the world if we can keep it. Thank you. God bless you.